my dad never really said much to me other than the do right rule. And Dad's do right rule was, you know what's right, do it. And, I used to always think that. I know we shouldn't be, out here drinking beer. We're not old enough. I shouldn't be doing it. I'm not going to do it. Dad said, do what's right. And that wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of lived my life a little bit by my dad's do right rule, although, I did some wrong too. The thing that I really regret the most in my life personally was my independent decision to stop playing something that I was committed to. And I've stayed committed to almost everything else in my life since then. I think a lot of us forget the successes that we've had. A lot of us forget the pain that we got through. I don't know if you've ever just stared in the mirror and just looked at your pupils and, of course you go back and forth between them and you're just looking into your soul and you're like, what am I going to be about?
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Blueprint. It's Brandon Adams with The Smoking Gun. And today we have Shy Anderson, developer, entrepreneur, investor. But I think he said what his best name is, Super Dad. Let's see. Shy, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Well, man, I appreciate you having me. It's I felt like I put you off for a few months but I'm glad to be here.
No, it's like, we got some mutual friends and, that it's funny the way they connect people, just in our brief 10 minutes that we had before this, seeing so many commonalities between the two of us, man, I'm really excited about this conversation because one, your spirit is very calming, but two is like, you got a lot to talk about, and a lot that I can learn from and everyone else as well. So, appreciate you coming on.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't necessarily look at myself that way, but It's a compliment to hear that you've got a few minutes with me and you think that way.
Yeah.
I hope I don't let you down.
No, you'll be great. You'll be great. So, Shy, where were you born? Where are you from?
I grew up in a small town in Arkansas, like Little Rock, which is kind of funny. I'd say it's a small town called Little Rock, but I grew up there and I spent most of my life in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful up there. I love going through that part of the town. Like they got the trees change and it becomes a little rockier and the pines come in. I love that area.
Little Rock, my dad used to tell me it's like the best kept secret in the world. Because you really are on the beginning of the prairie and the beginning of the Ouachita Mountains and the Ozarks. And so you really have both the mountains, hills, big trees, but then you can dip off and run down to the plains and go duck hunting, deer hunting. And you got both sides of that equation. And it's a beautiful place.
Oh, man.
It's slow now. I was just back there for my brother's wedding, and it's compared to this Dallas Metroplex. I mean, it's a snail crawl around that place.
Well, that's that's kind of where I've gotten this stage of my life. Anyways, I prefer the snail crawl versus the hustle and bustle.
It was good going back and seeing all the guys and seeing my brother. As happy as he is. Remarrying and kind of starting his new chapter for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you find that as you get older that you remove yourself from more of the limelight and out into the woods like most of us seem to do, or are you still in it?
I don't necessarily think I've removed myself. My focus right now is giving back. There's a motto that and my ex-wife might have coined it, saying to those who have been given the most, much is expected. And it might not be exactly that way, but I've always felt like, it's my turn. I need to help where I can and, be my best with not only my friends, but my kids and my coworkers.
Starting out in Little Rock, Arkansas, where'd you go to school there? Was family and everything? And
I'm giving my age away, but I was back then when they did all the desegregation, and the busing and, early on, I didn't grow up with a lot. My family, my mom and dad worked hard and, they hit that busing. And so I got bused all the way to the other side of Little Rock and I was in the all black school. And so, my upbringing was a little different than my peers. And I was blessed in a way that, when I had the opportunity to take an entrance exam into an all boys preparatory school called Catholic High School for Boys in Little Rock, I did real well on that test, scored real high. so I was accepted into that school, and that was my first like entree into being in competitive nature from a scholastical standpoint, because you weren't in the public schools, you really weren't challenged, from A, B, C, D, you were just getting through. But when I got to that school, it was a different ball game, and that really probably was the beginning of shaping who I am.
What age was this?
Well, I guess I was 15.
Okay.
14, 15, right when you're going into this 8th grade and the 9th grade.
And so what was that school like?
Amazing. I mean, it's hard to explain to people because it was an all boys school back in the day. And, across the valley, you had the St. Mary's, which is an all girls school. And that was kind of our sister brother school. But, getting up every day and going to school with all guys and learning how to get along with men from an early age. A lot of guys, let's say, don't really get that opportunity to have to, be a comrade with the good, the bad, and the ugly in an all boys school. And, and it was a development process for me. And it was a challenge because I spent my whole life in a public school in a bad environment, not learning, how to dissect sentences, not really understanding the math. And here I'd get put into a prep school in the upper track. And, that's really when I started recognizing some of my own insecurities, which it's good if you recognize your insecurities because you can do something about them, and you're not brought down by them. And that was one, is what I don't know what these guys know. I don't learn the same. I don't understand the same. But it also helped me later in life when my kids go to school, because my kids had learning differences, and learning differences, a lot of people don't understand them. It doesn't mean that you're not smart or that you're stupid. It just means your brain sees and hears things differently than my brain. But it doesn't mean you're any smarter or I'm any smarter than you. And my upbringing helped me with my kids and kind of deal with that growing up.
Did you feel like, as you went into the school, did you feel like a little bit of an outsider looking in? Did people know about where you were from? Was this something that was kind of brought up or held against you? Because you go from one side to the other like that, where it's, one is really led by wealth, but you got in through opportunity.
I got an opportunity. But most of my friends, I grew up, on that side of town, and most of my friends that went to the parochial schools, the Holy Souls or the Good Counsels or the Trinity School, they were all going to school there. I mean, it was a coveted school. Everybody wanted in. And if you were Catholic, you got auto in, and then everybody else had to take a test to get in, even the Catholics, because they put you in, in when I call it sections, right?
Groupings, yeah.
Super smart, medium smart, not real smart. And we call that, the short bus group. But,
yeah.
So I wanted to go there because that's where all my friends were. But I was also a really good athlete. Growing up, that's kind of what I leaned into. I leaned into that hard because I didn't have that friendship group from first grade all the way up through 7th grade. I had them in the neighborhood, but, that was playing kick the can and kickball and hide and seek. But athletically, I didn't have that, and I wanted to be with those guys. And they wanted me. I mean, which made it great. Athletics brings a lot of kids together.
Do you think athletics is what helped you get into that school?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I actually think it was my score on the entrance exam that allowed me the opportunity.
What sports did you play?
Pretty much everything.
Okay.
We talked baseball earlier. That was one sport that I didn't really enjoy because it just seemed like it was a slow-paced sport. And I laugh today as I wouldn't let my kids play it. So my middle son wanted to play baseball, and he wasn't as athletically gifted as the other two. And I was like, I got to let him play it all. I'm not going to deny him anything. And I think I brainwashed my youngest son, and my daughter didn't want to play baseball. So, and we went through one season of baseball to where my middle son said, Dad, I don't like baseball. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah, that's cool. So you played everything that you went through from time you were a freshman all the way through into high school?
Yeah, at Catholic High, you had, back in the day, you had basketball and football and track were kind of the main sports, but then you had some other sports that were more club sports like soccer. Growing up, I played tennis, and I think I learned a lot about myself playing tennis. And I've actually told some of my peers, not to name drop, but and I'm not going to name drop, but I've told one of the people we know that's a high celebrity that then you need to get your boys in tennis.
Mm-hmm.
They need to play tennis. And he was like, well, why?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I think it helped me develop all my athletic skills. I had them,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you develop them? And you think about tennis, it's like you hit the ball over a net. You've got to have a little hand-eye coordination to hit the ball. And then you've got to have your feet placement in order to put power into the ball. And once it goes over the net, what are you doing? You're waiting on them to hit it back to you. So now you got to anticipate where that ball's going to be coming. Offense, and how defense. Do you get to that ball? Yeah. And then, so it's back and forth. And the other thing I liked about tennis is it's just you. If you mess up, you messed up. Nobody else messed up. So you put a lot more pressure on yourself to be, perfect in practice and in your game. And, up until, I guess, 13, 14, I was one of the top players in the state in tennis. And then I got into team, and I like team more than solo. So I transitioned over to playing football and basketball.
Mm-hmm. You, did you ever play golf?
I did.
Yeah. You still play at all?
Hold on the story. Yeah, I used to be really good. My brother's really, really good. He's 4-time club champ back in Arkansas. And the difference between golfers, right? I'm a better golfer than him. He's got a better mind than I do. Yep. And I say that because we can both stand over a putt. I mean, Brandon, you can be over a 3-footer and I can be over a 3-footer. Well, he makes his. I think too much and I get the woofs, right? Yeah. And so for that reason alone, his mind allows him to be a better golfer. Athletically, he's not anywhere near. Yeah. But I mean, when you look at the pros today, there's something up there in that brain that makes them what they are.
I play a lot of golf, so there's a buddy of mine that I always talk to, and he'd say, man, we play against each other all the time. He's like, I score better than you all the time until we play against each other and you beat me, or we get in tournaments, you beat me. He's like, can you give me some insight? And we're friends, so I tell him, I was like, here's the deal, man. Like, you make it bigger than it is. I said, if you just took a drone and put it above us, and this is going to be kind of crazy, but if you took a drone and put it above us, and it's 10 feet above us, and it's videoing what we're doing, what's it seeing? And it's like, oh, we're hitting a shot down the fairway. You can see where it lands and blah, blah, blah. I said, take it up 1,000 feet. Now what's it seeing? Oh, it sees some guys down there on the golf course or whatever. I was like, take it up another 1,000 feet. What's it seeing? Oh, it sees the city and it sees whatever. And I said, take it up another 1,000. What's it seeing? He goes, I don't know. It's like some green down there, whatever. I said, no one cares what we're doing. Nobody. I said, that's the matter behind this whole thing is like, you build it up so big in your head. I want to beat you, but I'm not building this thing up any bigger than it is. You and I are two jackwagons sitting in a golf course somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. And I just know what I can do. And it doesn't matter whether, you put this mind game on yourself or not. There's a lot to that. I think, being able to step outside of yourself and be able to, turn that part off, because there's so many talented people out there that just get in their own way, So yeah, I totally understand that part of it when it comes to, the mind game that goes with golf and everything else and athleticism. Like, there's guys that can hit it across the moon, but you can't score,
golf's another solo sport too, that, it's on you. And it's also a skill sport. Tennis is a skill sport, but I think athletes that don't necessarily have a skill can win at tennis. But in golf, you can be the greatest athlete, but you got to have the skill, and that gets in your head.
Yeah. So you played football all the way through high school?
Yeah, I played football for Catholic, all the way through, and then I had the opportunity to come play at SMU, and that was not my dad's desires. He was really a big Arkansas fan, and he had told me that if I was going to play football in college, that I was going to play at Arkansas, and that was the end of it. And so I, honored him. And I was fortunate enough, I played for Lou Holtz, and Lou Holtz had recruited me. And I went up and played up with him. And of any one man, from an athletic or sporting standpoint, I learned so much from Lou Holtz in 2 years. And I even today on how I dealt with my kids, how I dealt with my coaching, how I deal with my friends. There's a lot of Lou Holtz that's there, and there's another thing that's helped me a lot. Is it was one of my biggest regrets. I mean, I played football at Arkansas. At the end of my sophomore year, I decided that I didn't want to play anymore.
Mhm.
I was a little burned out, been going hard my whole life. And, and I made a bad decision, and I didn't have the guidance from my father at the time. And my mom and dad split early. And back in the day, that was not normal,
Mhm.
especially in small towns. I mean,
What's early?
I was probably 7, 8. And
Okay.
then when my dad told me he was leaving,
Mhm.
I was 10, and so dad was never around. And I remember you mentioned your dad and talking about going to all the games.
Mhm.
My father used to stand on the hill, watching every single one of my practices. But I never had a connection with him because when practice was over, he disappeared.
Mm.
And so I really didn't know my father. I knew he was a good man. I wanted to be around my father really bad. I think a lot of this shaped me on how I became a dad.
Mhm.
I used to remember getting up early in the mornings when I was 10, 11 years old, and I'd ride my bike up to the country club of Little Rock. And I knew that he would make that first turn, at roughly 9:15. And so I would want to be up there so I could see him come up, hole number 9, and they parked the little golf carts, and I could sit on the fence and watch him putt it out. And then he would come up and, shake my head, and we'd walk in, and then I'd wait outside the men's locker room, and they'd go in there and get their drinks and then come out. And then I would jog along with them to hole number 10, and they'd tee off, and I'd say, bye, Dad. And then I'd get in my bike and I'd ride back home. And that was every Saturday growing up because I wanted to be around my dad,
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough, man. I can sense that, understand that,
Yeah.
quite honestly. Like that's a heavy one.
It's heavy, but it again, he wasn't there when I kind of needed him to be there,
Yeah.
and again, I made some decisions that were not, I didn't have the influence that I look back now and that I have given my kids.
Mm-hmm.
But when I graduated from the University of Arkansas, and it's a fun story, his dad said, I'm going to pay for your school for 4 years. That's your job. You're going to go up there and you're going to work at school, football and school. And I get to the end of the year, and you got all these little classes you got to take to finish up. Could be basket weaving or walking. Or they've got these, that makes no sense why you got to have that hour credit.
Right.
And I had an hour credit of, I think it was volleyball. And Dad said, I'm not paying for it. And I'm like, no problem. And, I've been working my whole life ever since I was little. And this is a great story. My dad wanted me to start working when I was like 11 years old, and we had a push mower. If you remember, with the wheels and the blades. And so he and I went down the street and talked to the neighbors about me mowing their yards. And so I got several jobs, and then, I'd go push that little mower and mow it and then rake the leaves up and all that. And I thought I was doing a great job, right? They were loving it. But what I didn't know is the next day when I would go to school, my dad, who was he was a real estate professional, and he owned his own company, and they managed properties. He would send his yard crews by, and they would clean the yards and mow them up and everything. So in my mind, he was teaching me to work, but I had a backstop and making sure I was getting the job done right. And so I've always worked. I've worked from 14 years old when all my friends are hanging out by the swimming pool. Here I am on the summer. And I laugh when I say this. As a kid, you're wanting to be like everybody else. I call it kind of the herd mentality. Is all my buddies are out by the pool, all my buddies are having fun, all my buddies are talking to the girls, and here I am at a little store called Jippy Print. All right, and Jippy Print was back in the day where all the legal offices and they would send all their print work down to a print shop, and then they would print it all, and then I would deliver all the print work. To all the different floors in Dad's office building. And, so I've always worked, it's never been a question of from the integrity standpoint. I've always got up and gotten after it. It was when I graduated from college, and I thought I was always going to go to work with my dad. And then I took it's back then you could take your real estate broker's test for the license. To get your license, take the test. And Dad called me one day and said, hey, this is the last opportunity to where you can actually take the real estate broker's test. And if you pass it, you get your broker's license, because after this date, you got to take a real estate sales test, and you got to work for, if you pass it, you got to work as a real estate sales professional for a broker for a number of years before you can take your broker's test. So so I went down there and took that test and ended up scoring pretty high on it and got my broker's license. So I thought I'd be working for my father right out of college. And that was in 1985. And the world was different. It wasn't a good time. And there was a nepotism clause that my father had in his business with his partner. And his partner, Dixon Flake, had a daughter who was never going to be in the business. And so Dixon pulled the trigger on the nepotism clause to keep me from coming to work with my dad. So, when I graduated from school, I didn't have a job, didn't know what I was going to do. And ended up moving in with my father because I didn't have any income. And looking back on it, that was absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, because I didn't know my dad, and I got to see him, I got to know him, I got to talk to him. And
so after all that, so being gone at 10, going through school, going to a private school, going to college, doing all those other things, you had no personal relationship except for just seeing him at the turn. And then all of a sudden, do you think a lot of those things that you were doing, trying to, were they to live up, to expectations, or?
Yeah, I think all of us want to make someone feel good about what we're doing. I always wanted to please my father, and I always, I tell people today, I mean, I don't know if you have a business mentor or someone that you can talk business with. I created a business mentor in my mind, which was a guy named Joe Ford, which is, we'll talk about that, but it's a company that I work for. But I also had it in my mind with my dad. My dad never really said much to me other than the do right rule. And Dad's do right rule was, what's right, do it. And, I used to always think that, I know we shouldn't be, out here drinking beer. We're not old enough. I shouldn't be doing it. I'm not going to do it. Dad said, do what's right. And that wasn't right. And so I kind of lived my life a little bit by my dad's do right rule, although, I did some wrong too, but
yeah, as we all do.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I mean, people hold you to a standard of what you're supposed to be, and what you hold yourself to as well. But sometimes they don't allow you to fail either, and it's like, none of us are perfect, none of us as we walk this earth. And I think people are just looking to say, gotcha. You didn't do it this time. You ain't as good as you said. No, it's not that I'm not as good as I said. I've just strive to be something.
Yeah, but don't you think today, Brandon, people really are looking more for the negative instead of really looking at the positive? And I've been driving over, I was talking with one of my buddies, and I said, I'm really want to make sure you catch me if I'm say something that's more negative, because I really feel like I'm a positive person. And I know we all have rough things that happen during the day or during our lives, and have been through a lot. But at the same time, I mean, that's behind us, man. Let's go.
Right. Yeah. No, I do think there's a lot of that. I mean, and I think that the reflection is not people are trying to catch you or people are trying to pin something on you. I think it is relief for themselves for not living up as well.
Right.
And so when they see somebody else that they think is doing really well and they find out they fail too, they do want to call it out, so they can say, see,
it makes them feel better.
Makes
about
them feel
themselves.
better,
whatever. Right.
And that's a part of it. And look, I know I'm not perfect. I know I've made mistakes. I know that I try to be better every single day, but man, I've got, people I probably need to say I'm sorry to at some point in my life for things that I've said or done. And hopefully as the more gray I get on my face, the more I recognize the dumb things I've done, And so I'll tell you right now, like in the last probably 5 years, I've changed a lot of my outlook on who I am. Even in the last 2 years since I've started this company, I've changed my outlook on how I see things. I always talk about, you come across hardships and they define you, right? I've won at a lot of things when it came to situational, whatever it was. Career moves, sporting things, whatever. The art thing's done really well. Like win had seemed to been in my favor, and getting punched in the face over and over and over again seems to humble a person, you know, and then it's like, oh, I wasn't necessarily winning. I was on a lucky streak, you know, and I just hadn't caught it yet. So I didn't recognize, you know, because a lot of times I think just work harder, people. It's out there. Just work harder. But, you know, circumstances happen and things don't always work out the way you wanted to work out, and things are hard, you know, and as you're leaning into it, it's like, this is a growth mode for me, you know, not just as a company, but as a human being, you know, to sit here and look like I've got to figure out other things, and I've also got other people depending on me to get things done. It's not just me, and I can pop off and do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it, because I've got people depending on me, you know, and that's an added stress, but you don't know until you know.
You know, you say that. I think a lot of us forget the successes that we've had. A lot of us forget the pain that we got through, and you got to remind yourself. And you know, coming in to talk to you, I was just thinking, well, what are we going to talk about? You know, but then you kind of go back in time, and you're like, yeah, you know, when I graduated from college, I did start a company on my own. I did sell that company. You know, I did go to work, you know, as a straight commission sales rep, you know, for a major corporation. And, you know, and I did, you know, I did. But, you know, as you get older, you forget how you overcame so many obstacles on your own, to where you're going to get through this next phase. The sun's going to rise tomorrow. And, but we do, we got to give ourselves more credit for the successes we've had.
Yeah. And also, you know, sometimes it takes a whipping to get us to see the other side too. Right.
Right.
You can quickly forget, you know, what it's like. If you have too many successes in a row, you can forget what it's like to fail, or what it's conditioning, you know? And then when you do, it's like, oh yeah, there it is. I got this.
Well, you talked about being a dad. I know you want to be the best dad you can be. And you know, I know I've been a very good dad for my kids. At least I hope that's how everybody portrays it and sees it. But I also know I want to be a very good friend. And my father not being the dad that I wanted has made me the dad I am.
Oh yeah.
Because it was more of what I was missing out that I knew that I wanted to give to my kids. I wanted my dad, you know, to be around me, to talk to me, to you know, exchange thoughts. And it wasn't until I moved in with him that we started having those exchanges that I realized that how rewarding that would have been for me. Now, I don't know if it would have changed me, but I know what I made some decisions different. I wouldn't have quit playing football, you know, and, you know, those conversations with my father, there's one that I had with him that I still remember. He sat in an orange chair, and my dad drank too much. And, but he was one of those functioning alcoholics. And I remember him sitting one day, and I came in, and I'd just been promoted. I was a top salesman in the country, out of Little Rock, Arkansas, a small little town. But we were, you know, and again, you look back on your history, how lucky was I? I had an opportunity to go to work for a wireless telephone company back in the day when everybody was making fun of me because I was putting phones in cars, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, what? That's a crazy job. Who wants a phone in their car? Well, in Little Rock, Arkansas, you could get around everywhere in 10 minutes, right? But I started selling them, did real well. And then they promoted me to be a sales manager. Well, I was making over $150,000 a year back in 1987.
That's a chunk.
Killing it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went home and I told Dad, I said, I don't want to be a sales manager because here I am in my early 20s and I'm going to be the boss of all these older people. And I said, I don't want to be their boss. You know, I want to just sell. And I remember Dad sitting me down and he said, well, okay, right now you're thinking about the money aspects of it, but what do you want to be? What do you see yourself doing one day? And I said, I want to be president of this company. And he says, you want to be president of Alltel? And I said, I do. And he goes, well, then you're going to have to be sales manager. And then after sales manager, whatever job they offer you, you're going to have to be that. And you're going to have to be just as good as sales manager as you were as a straight commission sales rep.
Yeah.
And he said, it's going to be a challenge. And it was. And, you know, as we all know, I mean, if I'm playing tennis, it's just me playing. If you're playing golf, it's just you playing.
Yes.
But when you've got to get a whole bunch of people hitting the golf ball, it's hard. And I learned a lot early on on how to motivate, how to manage. And then, I think the whole world changed for me on how to recognize a person for what they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And this is way off grid, but my daughter at 3 years old was freaky fast. And a friend of mine, Greg Hatcher, who owns a large insurance company in Arkansas that he founded and has grown it, he asked me if my daughter would play on his girls' soccer team. And I'm like, Greg, she's 3 years old. He goes, well, look how fast she is. And I said, well, maybe. He goes, you'll help me coach. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I take my little, she's 3.5-year-old daughter and put them on this little team. And they're just, they're just running around having fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to listen to how Greg talked to the kids.
Mm. And
it was like, I'd never heard another man talk to other people's kids with such positivity, and it wasn't anything special. It would be like, Brandon, today, the way you kicked that ball, it was amazing. I loved how you ran up to it and you kicked that ball.
Mm-hmm.
But what he was doing, he was motivating all the other kids to learn how to run up and kick that ball.
Yeah.
I'm being real simple. And then as we went on, it was like, my daughter's Haley, and he would say, Haley, the angle that you took going across the field was so great. You saw where you had to be on the other side of the field, like we've coached you, and you got there before the ball got there. Mm-hmm. Well, he was complimenting her, making her feel good, but he was telling all the other kids, that's what we all got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that woke me up to how I can coach kids. And I changed a lot of it. And I'll tell you a couple of funny stories, mm-hmm. but it also helped me with how I dealt with employees. Mm. It's like we all have our processes and this is what we're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But really, where do you want to be? You want to be the top salesman? All right, well then here's some things you can do different. And you just challenge them and you point them, but then they're all striving to be better. And I had a lot of success with that.
Yeah, I heard this one time. It was talking about kids in general, talking about your own children, and you give them like a positive interaction. You tell them like, you're one of the best kids I've ever seen. I never worry about you doing anything wrong. You're just one of the best things ever. Well, they condition themselves to hearing that, and they hold themselves to that standard. Mm-hmm. If you tell them they're a screw up all the time, then they start to believe they're a screw up. And it's okay to screw up because you've already called me a screw up, and I am a screw up, right? But if you tell me how great I am and what I should be doing and how I'm going to be conquering the world and all these other things, it's like, I expect myself to do those things, and it really makes total sense for people to buy in for that,
It does. And, if they buy into it and you make it fun, it magnifies. And, I brought a couple of things you asked me to bring. And, when I kind of look back on how I've molded people, been very, very blessed. I mean, the greatest feelings that I've had here lately is seeing a 32-year-old girl that I coached with my daughter's team light up, Coach Shy, mm-hmm. or seeing a 29-year-old boy that I coached with my son, Coach Shy, mm-hmm. and you just see their energy of like, it's good to see you. Mm-hmm. And then you peel it back. I was at El Braco the other night and eating dinner, and this guy came up to me and he goes, you're Shy Anderson, aren't you? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I played against you. I mean, I didn't play, but my kids played against you. And he goes, I really enjoyed watching how you coach. And I'm like, tell me more. And he said, he goes, what was that thing you said? Something about, money in the bank? Mm. And I said, oh, yeah. I had this little deal with the kids is try to make it fun for them. Mm-hmm. I used to tell them every day, it's like, putting something in your piggy bank, right? You got to make a little deposit. So we're going to today, what deposit are we going to make? Today, mm-hmm. we're going to learn how to, catch the ball. Today, we're going to learn how to come out of our breaks. Today, we're going to learn how to backpedal and brake on the ball and mm-hmm. whatever it might be. And I'm talking football, but at the end of the practices, I would always tell them, tell me what you think. And they would all together, money in the bank, which meant we had a good practice. Well, mm-hmm. that transitioned into games. So when mm-hmm. we were playing games, it was, I'm a different dad than most, mm-hmm. if you remember the awards they used to give all the kids, I called them participation trophies. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. No,
me either.
my deal was, listen, God, we're playing to win.
Mm-hmm.
We all have roles on the team, and I go to my middle son, who heart of gold, one of the greatest human beings. I mean, greatest kids you'll ever be around. Smiles all the time, smart as hell, almost photographic memory, remembers statistics, but he wasn't as athletic as he wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I watched how other coaches, and I'm not beating them up, they weren't doing the Lou Holtz, as I talked about before. Lou Holtz would look at his players, and he would create plays and put his players in positions to take advantage of their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
All coaches think they're doing it, but Lou Holtz was a master at it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I saw that with my son. I knew that in order for my son to enjoy youth sports, I had to coach. Mm-hmm. So in first grade, there's a gentleman named Kenny Trout, who's a big part of me being involved in the sports here in Dallas. But he and I were coaching our church league team, and my son was not that good at basketball. He was a great rebounder, and he listened really well. But then Kenny had a really good kid. Preston Trout was a really good basketball player. And then everybody had their little strengths. A couple could dribble. We had William Butter that can dribble. We had a couple of guys, but so. For me, it was like that Lou Holtz deal is, let's put them all in, they're all going to play, but let's put them in a position they can have success at, so that at the end of the game, I can compliment them. And I used to bring all the parents in as well. So like, I don't know your son's name, but what's your
Cooper and Lincoln?
Cooper. So if I'm coaching Cooper, and I'm everybody gather up. So I hold them all up, and then I'd go, Cooper, man, what a great job today. I said, the way you handled the ball, and, the way you brought it down the court, your dribbling was really the best I've seen you do. I love how you're improving. Well, he swole up, but guess who else is swole up?
Everybody, yeah.
Daddy swole up.
Yeah,
my kid, man, look at, he's getting complimented. And it created a whole unity for the families. And so with Kenny, we coached that first year, second year, and then Kenny had an older son, and he ended up starting a team called the Texas Titans. Texas Titans was an AAU elite basketball team, and he's got several players that ended up in the NBA. Well, here we're going probably third grade now, years later, because his kids are older. Kenny giving back to his employees who had some younger kids. He still had the Titans, but they were a lot older. He had some kids that were my youngest son's, Paxton's age, and Paxton, it was another challenge because we were told when he was young that he was they call it, had dysgraphia, which is fine motor skill difficulty, like writing. It means nothing, but back then his parents were like, oh boy, we got a problem. He's going to have a tough time going up and downstairs, or he can't write. And so I was really into making sure that, he got an advantage, athletically, and to play on team sports. Ended up being a freak. I'll tell you more about him. But with Kenny had this little startup team, and it was a little tryout team. And so I went to Kenny. I said, hey, can my son try out? And he goes, oh, listen, this is only for, really elite players. And I said, well, Kenny, I coached your kids, and I let your kids play on my teams. Can he at least just try out? And he said, look, I'll let the coach handle it. So a guy named Coach Scott, who was a great coach, let him come try out. And he told me, he said, he's not really as good as, where we want, but boy, he plays good defense. And this is my youngest son. He said, why don't let him play this weekend? We're shorter player. And so he played and played lights out defense. Might be best defensive player you would see it at that young age. And so he made it's called the Texas Titans. Well, there's a group of kids that were in the third grade. Well, a year goes by, and Kenny decides that his kids are both graduated and gone. Now they've moved on. The older Titans are gone, but the younger Titans are still there and didn't have anybody to back them. I said, I'd do it. I'm going to give back. These are all underprivileged kids that come from all over Dallas. And I kind of put my same mentality. We're a team. We're going to, but the deal was, when you came into the gym, it's time to get it on. We're not here to play fun and games. We're here to get better at basketball.
Yeah.
And, I brought this little jersey here. I'm gonna make that whole thing tump. But my little Texas Titans jersey, and I brought it because it's got like Mike Miles was on our team. Mike Miles was one of the top point guards that ended up playing at TCU. Now, we're in third grade, right?
Yeah.
And then I've got Hayden Brittenham, who ended up playing college ball. And then I've got, everybody wants to talk about Cade Cunningham. Well, Cade Cunningham was just a little meaty kid that could dribble the ball. And that jersey on the far end is Cade's. But I talk about this because it was kind of how we set practice. It's like you give them what our goals, what we're trying to accomplish, but it wasn't for the season. It was each practice. What are we going to get better at today? And I used to have them go around, and Coach Scott was Popsicle was his name, but he used to manage this. We would really go around. So I would say, Brandon, what do you want to accomplish today? And it's your turn. Now, it would also help them with public speaking, but they would say, well, today I want to get better at my jump shot. Great. All right, cool. Cade, what do you want to get better at today? Well, today I want to get better at my footwork on defense. Great. And so we go around the beginning of the practice that way. Well, at the end of practice, we bring everybody back in, and then we would compliment them on what they did good, not what they did bad, but what they did good. And that team unity just grew and grew and grew. And then we ended up being one of the top teams in the country. And you can kind of joke. I've always been didn't lose many games. And I look back on it. Well, Paxton was one of the best football players, and he was my son. Yeah, well, of course I had him on my team. Well, I also had Cade Cunningham on my team. I also had Mike Miles on my team. I can go through the list of all these kids that ended up playing college ball. I don't know. Cade would have, Mike would have, but I don't know if the rest of them would have made it to the level of achievement that they got to if it wasn't for their families, because they all came together and followed a family feeling of the sport and their work ethic. All of them developed a work ethic that Cade's ended up being the number one pick in the NBA draft. And he just signed the mega contract last year and had one of the best years of his life last year playing basketball. But Paxton, remember I talked about me quitting football. That was a regret of mine. And, I think in life, you can't go back and dwell on regrets. A really good friend of mine had me read a book called The Midnight Library. And The Midnight Library is about this female that wasn't happy in life and had all these regrets and was contemplating suicide. And, because she was so miserable with all the things she thought she should have done. And it kind of wakes you up to realize that regrets is really the direction you turn for the life you're in now. So it's really not a regret. It's actually something that is an accomplishment. Me not playing football has allowed me to influence not only my son, but to see how my son has influenced others. For instance, Paxton wanted to play football for the University of Texas. His grandfather played at the University of Arkansas. His uncle played at the University of Arkansas. I played at the University of Arkansas. His first cousin was playing at the University of Arkansas. But Paxton decided he wanted to do his own thing. And he ended up getting an opportunity to play wide receiver for the University of Texas. And he went down there and that commitment. And I told him, you said earlier when you were talking, once you go, you're going. You're not going to quit. You're going to stay in it. My biggest regret, and I pounded it in him, that your dad, the thing that I really regret the most in my life personally was my independent decision to stop playing something that I was committed to. And I've stayed committed to almost everything else in my life since then.
Right.
Well, he was able to use that story with several of his friends that wanted to quit playing football. And he was able to sit down with them and explain to them why it's important for them to stay in the game. And again, it's rewarding to see your kids give back as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's so temporary anyways, as you go through it. Right. And whatever you come across, like you take opportunity and sometimes you let it pass you by, and really, if you just fight it out for just a little bit longer, it's going to disappear anyways. But you're at least going to get every ounce out of it that you can get out of it.
Right.
I
had, with Paxton, he's was a very good athlete, and obviously being able to stay on the team and play for the University of Texas. But I always was positive. Oh, you're gonna play. You're gonna get in. And he was like, Dad, you do know that the two guys in front of me are the best football players I've ever been around in my life. And one of them ended up getting drafted in the first round and going to Kansas City. And then this last year, that guy just got drafted. And he was like, but his whole point was, I'm in it. I'm gonna make them better. And my goal right now is to be the best I can be on the practice field. And that was the mentality we taught them as coaches growing up. And he was like, I can make this team a championship team, and my goal is to win a national championship. So how do I help my team win a national championship? To hear your son tell you that is so rewarding, because it's like, wow. And they did. They ended up, getting in top 3 and playing for the big ring. Didn't get it, but the simple fact that he had a team that almost did is very rewarding.
As you start putting that into your kids too, like that feedback that comes from that, like you always wonder if what you're saying really resonates or it just passes on through, right?
Yeah.
But like the story that you told of don't quit, or this is what I get to do because of the input that you've given me, that's super rewarding, as a parent in general, so, well, that's super cool. I want to turn the clock back just a little bit.
All right.
We kind of jumped forward just a little bit, but you started living with your pops, right? You started thinking about, it was the best thing that ever happened to you, right? Your first job, you said I couldn't go and I couldn't work for him. So your first job that you jumped into after that, were you rethinking the whole situation of, man, I may have messed up by following the lead of kind of where I've gotten to this point? Or was it like, I'm still going in the right direction?
I didn't know. I mean, I think most kids today, they don't really know, unless they're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. You don't really know what you're going to be doing. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, but it's funny. My first job out of school, I got a job working at Dillard's for a marketing company, and I was selling men's and women's underwear. And, I remember being Christmas time, and here I was so proud, and everybody knew me from, that small town. I'm in that little Dillard's department store, stocking underwear and making sure the shelves are right during Christmas time. And I'm seeing friends and people come through, and I'm ducking and hiding because I didn't want anybody to know I'm back here, pushing underwear.
Yeah.
But that was kind of my first job. And then when I had the opportunity to start my company to sell wireless telephones, I did that. And it was called Advanced Mobile Communications. And I did that for a year and ended up selling that company because another group wanted in, and there was only 2 distributorships, and I owned one of them. And they bought my distributorship. And then Alltel asked me if I'd come to work directly for them. And, I go back to that when I was talking about mentorship. Every decision I made when I became a manager, I would sit there and think, how would Joe Ford, what would he do in this situation? What decision would he make? And I think it made me realize that it's not about me. It's about it's about the company. And I need to make the best decision for the company. And it really helped me a lot. And, I've told Joe this, he's a lot older now, but I've told him this, that, you were a big influence on me because I worked he was chairman of the company. And in my mind, I was thinking, if he was sitting in this chair, the chairman of the company, what decision would he make? And it really helped me, the do right rule. It helped me make the right decisions and benefited me a lot.
When you said I started my first company, I mean, that's a big jump. You're selling underwear, and all of a sudden you start your own company.
Didn't know any better.
Like where do you even start? Do you go get an LLC? Does Pops tell you the roadmap to get this done? Like,
no.
Where did the phone line come in? I mean, where was this? Like, how did that even?
But I'm dating myself. But you go back in the day, it's a little past rotary phones.
Yeah.
But you back in the day, you got sat at a desk. My dad gave me he owned an office building or managed an office building, and he said, "Here's a little office, in a cubicle, and here's a phone, and we shut the door. You can do your deal." And I remember I used to get the phone book out and going through the phone book and just started cold calling and writing down names of people that might be interested. And again, I think I just outworked everybody. I didn't know any better, and started that company, and started several since. But and it just was, you see it, you feel it, you know.
But what did you run across that made you think phones?
Well, at the time I had the opportunity to go work for St. Paul Insurance, and I went up to Minnesota. And I remember it was freezing cold.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever been up there in the winter. It was below negatives, and they had us like a tube of crickets, right? I had to go to this meeting, but I couldn't walk outside. They had the doors locked because it was too cold. So I had to go through all these tunnels. Long and short of it, I didn't want to live there. I don't like being cold. So when I came back, I was like, well, I gotta find something else out to do. And I could either start this company and sell wireless telephones and make a fool of myself, or I could go to work for one of the biggest insurance companies in the world at the time, in my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go do this. So I started selling wireless telephones and had some success with it.
So then you moved on. You started to grow up from that one. You needed the distributorship. You owned that. How did you get that by yourself?
Well, I tried to get a job with Alltel.
Okay.
And I didn't have any sales experience. You know, they were hiring all these people that had Southwestern Bell telephone experience and ex-sales people. And, you know, these guys were, and girls, they had hired both. They were a lot older than me. And I was like, but I'll never have sales experience unless you give me a chance. You know, and I remember the guy I interviewed with named Joe Slayton. I threw a pencil at him and I said, give that back to me. Let me sell it to you. And he laughs about it now, but he was like, all right. So I tossed it back. And so I sold him on why he should own this pencil.
Yeah.
And he goes, man, I'd hire you if I had a spot, but I have no more spots. But we do have one distributorship, which means you'd have to start your own company and you'd be completely on your own, autonomous for us. You'd have to buy all your own phone. You'd have to do all your own marketing. But if you want to get in the business, I think I can work that out for you. And he went and met with Joe Ford, and Joe Ford said, yeah, give him a shot. So I got a shot and it worked out.
That's crazy. Let me sell you this pencil bag. It turned into,
I tried.
you
Next
got
time
your own
you
business.
interview somebody. I mean, because life's about sales.
Yeah.
Nothing happens until you sell something. I mean, you can, just like you can have the greatest, advertising agents in the world, but unless you sell your ability to a client, you just got in your mind a great advertising company. And, I've always had that motto, and I had that motto all the way through my career is, nothing happens unless we sell something, and then everything happens.
You sold that, you moved on, then you went to work for Alltel.
Yeah, I worked for Alltel for 15 years, and I had a variety of jobs, and ended up in the mid 90s. Alltel bought a company called 360 Communications, and I was kind of top of my game. I was the youngest president in their. I was a regional president, but I was the youngest one, and they asked me if I would run the 360 Communication merger. And so I ended up having an office in Las Vegas. I had an office here in Dallas, and I went with the transition of bringing 360 into Alltel's way of doing business. And so that allowed my wife at the time and I, we were living in Little Rock, to move here to Dallas. And, her family's business was here. So it was good for the kids and good for us to kind of base out of here. And it was a lot easier on me because, flying from Dallas to Las Vegas and to Phoenix and all the areas that I was managing, it was more efficient here. And then when we rolled that up and ended up selling Alltel, I had the opportunity to move back to Little Rock, and then and ended up making a decision to stay in Dallas.
So we jumped pretty quickly to you now have kids at this point, right?
Had those a long time ago, but yeah.
So you got married in college, directly out of college?
Out of college. I've been working for a while. I met Charlotte through, there was a debutante party back in the day. They still have them, but we were connected to be dates at a debutante party. Now, I knew of her because I played football with her brother, her older brother, and but didn't really know her. She's younger than I am, and that's kind of how we met, and then started our courtship, and ended up, getting married.
Yeah. How long after you guys met?
Oh, several years. 3 years. And Charlotte is a extremely talented woman, smart. Valedictorian of her school, ran for class president. I'm very blessed to have her as the mother of my kids, because I sent her a text over on Mother's Day, really just telling her how grateful I am that she is her mom, because there's so many traits that I see, positive traits that I see in my kids that she helped mold and shape. And she was a really good mom.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And so, you guys had 3 kids together?
We do.
Okay. And who are they and how old are they?
Haley is my oldest, Haley Alexis, and she is, I guess, 32.
Mm-hmm.
I hope she's 32. She'd be mad if she's not. And then my son, Shy Jr., is he's 30. And I've got Paxton, who's 6 years removed. He's 24.
Mm-hmm. And so they all, you did sports with all these guys, and
yeah, there was a rule. I mean, we all have our own rules. My kids had to play a sport. I felt, for me growing up, I thought it was very important to be involved in a team sport. It taught so many things. Anybody listening to this plays a sport can, add to it. But I really felt like it taught how to interact. It taught you, what your role was. It taught you how to communicate. It taught you how to win and lose. And it was important to me. So all my kids had to play a sport. My daughter said that, well, cheerleading is a sport. I'm like, no, it's not. But I allowed it to be a sport. Yeah. And then she hurt her back her sophomore year in high school. And so she couldn't play. She didn't make the cheerleading squad. And so she came in one day and I said, well, what sport are you going to play? And she's kind of gave me that look, and she just quit playing basketball. And she goes, I'm not. I said, you are. I said, I got lacrosse practice this afternoon. Go get a stick. And she was like, Dad. And so I had her come out. I didn't know at the time that girls had a different lacrosse stick than boys. So she was playing with the boys' lacrosse stick, which is a little easier to carry. And but I made her play lacrosse, and she hated me for it. I don't mean hate in the negative way. She just wasn't happy that I made her play lacrosse. But she played lacrosse her sophomore year, junior year, and in her senior year, she was a captain of her Highland Park lacrosse team. And so when she went out to colleges and put her applications out, because of her being the captain of her sporting team, the lacrosse team, she got accepted to every college she applied to. And then she had to narrow it down and ended up, choosing the alma mater of Arkansas. But that was one of my rules. They all had to play a sport. It's easy for the kids, the boys. They wanted to play. But.
Yeah. So yeah, she said thank you for that later.
Oh, we joke about it. I think she does thank me for it. She's such a wonderful girl. She's actually, works for the family now, and so capable, so talented. If she wants to get something done, she will get it done. She's just really talented.
That's great to hear. And so going back into your career, what was the next step? What was the big jump after that? After Altel?
It was a big decision for me. It was more of a family decision. I had an unbelievable career at Altel. I was one of the top in the company, and it sounds funny saying I'm not trying to brag on myself. I just was. And I gave that up, and I went to work for the family business and had various jobs in the family business, and ended up having the opportunity to be involved with some really cool companies. Papa John's. I was involved in the Arena Football League and part of the team, and had the opportunity to hire some individuals that are still with the organization today that I think the world of. And I tell you what's kind of cool is, and I'm gonna go back to what you asked, but my friends, people that my guy friends and girl, but my guy friends that I'm really close to are also really close to my kids. So I'll see one of my good friends hanging out with my daughter or hanging out with my son, and it makes me feel good because these are quality individuals, and they're also shaping the lives of my kids as well.
100%, yeah.
And I believe in them. And but I ended up hiring a couple of people that are still with the organization, and one of them runs their pro personnel in the scouting department, and he was in my son's wedding, which is crazy to think. He was my best friend. Will McClay's, he's an amazing human, one of the most amazing men you'll talk to. I mean, one of the guys you'd invite to come sit at your table. If you get to pick, 6, he's going to be one. And, but he, now runs their pro personnel, and my oldest son, Chabo, works for him in scouting. And it was just meant to be because Chabo loves sports. He loves statistics. And he was that kid that we all looked to if we had a question on, Terrell Owens. I don't know why I'm pulling that name up, but
Yeah.
you know, what's his 40? How many catches he had? What was it? He knew
How big
all the
was it?
stats.
Yeah.
He could tell you everything, and which helped the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Will was at his wedding, and it was fun being at the bachelor party and looking over and seeing a guy who I consider to be one of my best friends be in my son's wedding.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy to see how that kind of transitions. I've got a group of friends too that, you know, that some have been my friends since we were 12 years old.
Right.
Right. And now we're married and we all have families and we've all been together. And one of the guys has been with us for about 10 years as well now too. So, but when you get that group and they start to be seen as uncles, you know, as opposed to here's a friend of mine, you're kind of teaching your kids too about the strength of networking,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the strength of networking with people that have your back ultimately, you know, and that's a really strong trait. Like, I love that you said that, you know, because, you know, we're all raising our kids to do X or be this or be whatever, but a good human and recognizing other good humans and what people bring to the table is the number one thing that's out there.
Well, you know, my kids have there's a lot expected of them,
Mm-hmm.
just because of, you know, the family that they're in, and but they deliver. They're good kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for the most part, most of the kids don't come across as entitled. Mine definitely don't.
Yeah.
And they're very caring kids, and I'm blessed. And of course, I'm a dad, and I'm bragging on my kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but at the same time, I'm telling the truth. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think if any of my friends were to walk in here and you ask them, they would tell you the same thing I'm telling you. So it's not like I'm trying to make them something they're
Mm-hmm.
not. And it feels good to be a dad to
Mm-hmm.
that. Now, you introduced me as super dad, and up until, I don't know, a year ago, I was super dad to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was super dad. And how you doing, super dad? And it was kind of because they didn't want to call me Big Shy, and that's kind of what my dad was called, Big Sam. And so I'm hoping my grandkids one day will call me Big Shy, but they've now transitioned where they're calling me by my name.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my son the other day, I said, "You just call me Shy?" And I said, "That's the first time I've heard you say that." And he goes, You're like my best friend." And he goes, "I mean, we hang out, but, you know, I'm not going to introduce you as my dad
Mm-hmm.
because I don't look at you that way anymore. I mean, you are my dad, and you'll always be my dad, but I like hanging out with you."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "That's cool."
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I don't really remember introducing my dad as my dad. I just introduced him as Big Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And he got the nickname Big Sam because he was always up on the hill and in the huddle in the football field. All my buddies were, "Oh, Big Sam's up there," because he was just a big man.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. You know, I can't wait to cross that. I mean, mine are 19 and 16 now, and they're making that transition as they go through that. But I haven't got to that point yet, but I'm pretty excited about.
You'll get there.
Yeah.
You will. I can tell. I can feel it. You know, it's there's nothing more rewarding, and I think I could speak for, you know, Charlotte, my ex-wife, as well, is the relationship that she has with the kids and the relationship that I have with the kids, and I don't think we compete. I mean, you know, she's the greatest mom, and I'm hoping that I'm the greatest dad, and now we have a granddaughter. My son just had a little baby girl, and it's kind of cool and special. And, you know, it doesn't make me feel any different, but somebody says, "Are you feeling different being a granddad?" I said, "Actually not. I'm actually excited for my son because he's getting to take the same steps that I got to take." Like you mentioned earlier, it changed your life. It does. It makes you realize that there's a little more to life than just me, you know?
Yeah, it changes the scope of everything. And you know, it's just a page that I always say, I compare it to Field of Dreams. You remember the movie Field of Dreams or whatever?
I don't like baseball, so I probably didn't watch much of it.
Field of Dreams, there's a scene in there where Moonlight Graham is an old doctor from that they have to go get. Well, he says, "I'm not leaving," blah, blah, blah. So they end up driving down the road, and they pick up a hitchhiker on the way back. They were like, "Man, I thought we were supposed to get this guy or whatever." So they pull over, see this kid hitchhiking, said, "Hey, kid, where are you going?" He goes, "I'm looking for a place to play baseball." And they kind of look at each other. It's kind of a magic moment, you know, and they were like, "Sure, kid, what's your name?" And he goes, "Well, they call me Graham, Moonlight Graham." And they realize that this is a fast forward of that kid because the old man was a doctor. And he said, I'm married now. I'm taking care of a bunch of people. I can't do that anymore, right? Well, this is a personification of him as a younger kid, and he gets to go play on the Field of Dreams. But when he goes and plays for a little bit, a couple of times out, one of the little girls that can see the field falls off and starts choking. Well, he runs over to the edge and there's a rock path and then it turns to dirt. Well, he runs up and he steps at the edge of it. And then he looks over at everybody and everybody looks at him. And then as soon as he crosses over and steps onto the dirt, he turns back into the old man who's a doctor, saves the little girl's life. And then realizes that he knew that he could never go back if he stepped outside of this thing.
Uh-huh.
Well, they were like, you can't go back. He goes, it's okay. This is what I was here for. It's one of those things. I use that transition mentally. That meant a lot to me. You turn into something else. When you cross a path, you turn into something else. When I had my child, when I looked into my child's eyes, the very first moment when he was born, I just remember stepping from rocks to dirt and turning into some completely different human being that I was before, because I'd never seen this side of myself.
Uh-huh.
You know,
or felt that side of yourself.
I felt that side. I've never been that. And I turned into something completely different, and it was like that. And I just remember it. And I told my oldest, I was telling him, I was like, one day you will have this feeling. You'll turn the page and it will never go back. And I can't explain it to you. I can't even show you what it's going to be like. I can't even tell you, think like this or whatever, because you won't be prepared. You just don't know until you know. I remember my father telling me that he loved me. And I remember telling my father I loved him. But I never knew what real love was for my child until I had a child into my hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I never knew. So I couldn't even sense what my dad was telling me or my mother was telling me, you know?
And love is such a strong word, and it has so much meaning to it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's like, you know, I don't know what your high school was like. You don't know what mine was like. You know, I don't know what your childhood was like. You know, but we kind of assume we had something similar. I kind of assume your high school was a little bit like mine, but maybe it had girls, you know. I kind of assume your childhood was a little bit like mine, but we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
We all come from, you know, different experiences. And but that love thing, that's something I wanted more than anything between me and my kids. And I want to make sure that I delivered that.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, that transition of who you are through certain parts of your life, you transition, you become something else. You grow outside of what you were before, only through the experiences that you have, right? And so the more experiences you're able to come across or learn from or step through, the better you become, you know, and you know, sometimes it's for good and sometimes it's for bad, and it just toughens you up, you know.
Right.
Sometimes it puts armor on you, you know, for the next time, to prepare you for the next time you have to run through that wall, you know, when it's not necessarily open for you, but you got to push through, you know. So yeah, I think what you're saying right there and preparing our kids and saying my son has this child, or you had your first grandchild, and you can see, I'm not excited for that moment, but I'm excited for that moment. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not ready for that moment, but I'm excited for that moment.
It's different for everyone. You know, everybody was, you know, oh, how does it feel?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just happy for him.
Yeah.
Beautiful little girl. I mean, you know, I think the best way I can describe it is, David, which is his father-in-law, is Tori's his wife. He was on the phone with the mom who was in the birthing room, and I'm walking down the hall, and it was all of us in this little room, and he said, "She's perfect," and that word just described everything you needed to know.
Yes,
you know, five fingers, you know, on each hand, five toes on each foot, nose, eyes, breathing, perfect. I mean, they could have said beautiful, and you're like, all right, well, what else is there?
Yeah.
You know, they could have said tall or has hair, but it was perfect. Was perfect. It was you knew you had a good, healthy, beautiful little thing that you get to go look at.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, it's great that you've kept this, and I know that from hearing your story at this point, I know that you know, you've kind of danced through the fire when it came through what you saw as a kid to what you wanted to be as a father. And that really shaped you from what I'm seeing right here, like the way that you've talked to everything.
It did. And, you know, looking back on it now, I don't know if you've ever just stared in the mirror and just looked at your pupils. And, you know, of course, you go back and forth between them, and you're just looking into your soul, and you're like, what am I going to be about? You know, what am I? And, you know, I've had those moments where you just, you know, when things aren't going the way you want them to, it's a little struggle. And it's like, I want to be the best dad. You know, I can't say it's my purpose, but that's what I'm going to be. And so, you know, I tried to make decisions as what would be best for my kids, what would be best, you know, for them my kids got a little bit really blessed because they were able to see us work in the family. They were able to see their mom, grind it out and work. And she's so talented and does a big part of that family's business and all the charity work, and which really helped kind of carve me into getting into the development side. But and then they got to see me working in the family business. I ran the arena football team and, got accolades for doing that. We had a lot of success. They got to go to the games. They got to get on the field. They got to they got to go to practice. So they saw dad, they saw how dad interacted. They saw how mom interacted. And I think the influences of parents being able to show their kids, who they really are and how they treat people, were probably why my kids are where they are right now. I don't know where they're going to go. I think it's a good, trajectory, but I know they're special now.
Mm-hmm. It's really cool to see, the transition of success, people building up to who they are and what they are, and still having a humble nature about themselves without having to let everyone know where they're at the entire time. I mean, sure, people could have the ability to squash people at any point in time. But when you see people that have done well, like yourself, have been shaped by different things in your life, to still come through and sit in this thing and say, my kids are my most important thing that I've ever, done in my life is pretty special.
It's funny you just said something, because I'm hard on myself. I always think I can do better. I don't.
Restart the interview?
We'd probably have a better interview now. You probably direct it better, but no, I always feel like I can do better.
Yeah.
It's something that motivates me a little bit. It's not so much doing it because I want to win. More so than I don't want to let others down and I don't want to fail. So I don't know what that means, and then different people try to explain it different ways. But I got involved in a couple of companies that nobody thought would work. Everybody thought that's a joke. That'll never happen. And they ended up being huge, big successes. And
like what?
Back when I was running the Arena Football League, we knew we were going to shut it down. And the player salaries were more than we just couldn't afford to. It's not that we couldn't afford to keep the team up. The league couldn't afford to sustain the expenses that it was incurring. We weren't getting revenue. But one of the guys that was working there, I was really close to. I was on the finance team, board of finance, whatever. And his name was Joe Rankin. And Joe had two beautiful little daughters. And I was like, Joe, you're gonna have to find a job, because if we shut this down, man, you've got a family to support. I said, I'm just gonna give you a heads up, and I shouldn't have, because that was board confidentiality. But Joe went out and found a job as as kind of a manager of this company called Topgolf. And Topgolf had just come over. It was an idea in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and they just opened a little driving range. And what they were doing is they were going into these municipality golf driving ranges and digging these little holes and then putting their gear in. And they were kind of selling it as a gimmick. And so he went to work for them, and we shut the league down. And then he called me a couple months later and says, hey, we're looking at buying this Hank Haney, or taking over this Hank Haney range in Dallas, Texas, over here off Park Lane. And he goes, will you come out and look at it? And I'm all right, sure. So I went out and looked at it. And this was at the time when the family had been spending years trying to design AT&T Stadium. And so you can't imagine the thought that went into that. And, I've got to give Jerry a lot of credit. And I've said this about him before. He thinks like he's in a prison. And when I said that before, somebody said, like in jail? And I'm like, no, it's like he's in that prison when the light hits that rock and it shoots light everywhere. He thinks that way. And so we were always thinking of how we make a better stadium, how we improve it. Well, here I'm now walking into a driving range with one of my friends I respected and liked, and I wanted him to be successful. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, we can do something with this. And he's like, what? And so I ended up raising a bunch of capital through a couple of close friends. And we ended up designing the one up in Allen and created Topgolf as you know it today. And it was a success right out of the gate. And but my kids got to be a part of all that. And I will say this, when we first kind of got it up and running, here on the Park Lane. I'd taken one end of it and we designed it and tricked it up, and it was big like bowling. I mean, everybody knew what a bowling alley was. Well, I was like, man, we got to make it like bowling, and we got to make it like, going and sitting in a suite at a stadium, and everything's brought to you and you're entertained. And so it was easy for me to see it. Not anybody else really saw it that way.
Yeah.
And but I believed in it, and it ended up working out. But funny story is, it was Mother's Day. And we just kind of opened up the bays. And again, Mother's Day's in May. It was warm. And I grabbed Charlotte, the kids, and they were younger. And I said, we're going to take your mom out for Mother's Day dinner. And I remember taking her to Topgolf. And I remember the kid, she just looked at me. She goes, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's Mother's Day. We're going to have a good time." And she goes, "I cannot believe you're bringing me here." And we get up there and we had the best time.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, we were walking out, and she was, "That was the best Mother's Day I've ever had." And it was, again, just showed you the family atmosphere that you were creating within Topgolf. And anyway, that was one of the things that was kind of created, and nobody believed it.
Yeah, I remember going to Hank Haney's range over there and practicing. I worked in an agency in downtown, and I was looking for places to hit, and it was just there, right? And I remember when it turned to Topgolf, and I thought, man, this is pretty cool. To be like, it wasn't the same as, I didn't go to there to work on my game anymore. I went there to just enjoy and you could play at different levels with different people and do so many things. So you guys did a great job with that, to be quite honest.
I tried to explain it to folks as it's entertainment. A driving range is to go work on your game. You might take your kids up there, let them whack a ball, but this is entertainment. You're going to take them up there and everybody's going to have fun. And so that first time when I walked in and I saw a couple old men sitting on their little igloo ice chest, hit a couple balls, sit down, and like, they can't, they're taking the whole bay. We can't do that, and so it evolved.
Yeah.
And at the time I was running our Papa John's business that I ended up partnering with John Schnatter, and I was like, we had these old pizza machines, and I was like, we'll make pizza. So I ended up giving some machines to them and the par baked dough, and then some supplies. We couldn't make a Papa John's pizza, but it tasted pretty similar because it was all the same ingredients. But we started selling pizza by the slice, and that's just one baby step at a time to where now you've got this. You go there and you probably eat a fine dining place now.
It's funny, yeah. It's when you got resources, or you've seen things happen, and you can just implement them everywhere. It seems that business is just there to be made. Do you remember back when you thought business was hard?
Well, no. It's been challenging. The home building business right now is extremely challenging, and but I never thought it was hard because I enjoyed it. I thought selling telephones early on, car phones, was hard. It was taxing. It was too many no's. And my dad, it's a terrible illustration, but he used to say, keep stuffing them tennis balls in that tennis ball can and they'll start coming out. And, after a few months, all of a sudden I was getting callbacks. I was making sales. I'm like, people that I talked to months ago, and it started teaching me lessons that, perseverance, don't give up, keep going. If that's your goal and you want to be president of the company, make all your decisions. I'm going to be president of the company. And it's paid off.
Yeah. So you went from Papa John's to Topgolf. You're no longer with Topgolf? You're not doing anything with them?
No, Callaway came in and bought Topgolf, and which was, great day for all the investors. And it's, still out there and active. And I think right now Callaway, I'm not going to give stock picks, but Callaway merged with Topgolf, and it wasn't a great marriage. And Callaway now is looking at spinning off Topgolf. The stock is way depressed. And I think when they see the real value of what the Topgolf business is, when they finally put a denomination on it, you still have Callaway, which has a denomination as well. And I think together they're smaller than they will be separated. So I think that's going to be another little growth story in the future. But no, I'm not involved.
And so now you're doing home building?
Yeah. I've always done it. My dad was in real estate. I grew up around real estate, grew up around collecting rents. And so I started just on the side, building houses. And I enjoyed it. I liked the detail, the finishes. And then there was one day my ex-wife Charlotte was chairman of the National Salvation Army, and I remember going to a lot of meetings, but one in particular, the Salvation Army people were talking about there's not enough affordable housing, specifically in the Dallas Metroplex, and we're very involved as a family with them, more so than Charlotte.
Not just jumping in the bucket in the end zone.
Not just jumping in the bucket in the end zone, but that whole thing was her idea. Yeah. Not jumping in the bucket, but the whole together with Salvation Army. But they were talking about not enough housing, so I started looking into it, and I thought maybe this would be my give back. I enjoy building, and maybe I'll figure this out. And the city of Dallas has this, they call it land bank, land transfer program. It is difficult, but I enjoy it because I'm able to build a home for a family that now can afford a home. Because if the land bank program wasn't around, because they have them all deed restricted properties, so you can only make so much money, and you can only sell the house for so much. So it's not like we don't make much money in the business, but boy, the feel good is when you see that husband and wife or mom with kids or new homeowner be able to go into a 1,400 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, beautiful little home. I mean, it's a feel good. It's a give back, and it's in it. Early on, I thought, well, I can do something with homelessness. And then I learned early on that no, homelessness is a mindset. I mean, there's obviously things we can all do, but that person has made the decision to go sleep under that bridge.
Yeah.
So how can I help a family that really wants to give back, that wants to work, that wants to raise a family in a good area and live a good life and feel like they're part of the community. And anyway, so I started building these land bank, probably a little over 100 of them, and still cranking them out, but I also build the high end stuff as well.
So what goes into your everyday job for that? Are you picking location? Are you picking finish outs? Are you picking like who my people building on these pieces are? Like what are you doing?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
It's fun because I pick the land. I'll pick where I want to build, where the lots. It's mainly infill. So I'll pick the lots, and I try to buy them in clusters so that I can, my teams. And then I work with some really talented builders that do a really good job of building the homes. I'm more of an investor, when I explain it to people, but they call them developers. But I pick out all the finish out. I design all the homes. I've got an architect that I work with. And they're very similar, but I need to change them up because if I'm on the same street and I'm doing a lot of work over by Fair Park, I want the homes to look a little different so they really make that community pop.
Yeah.
And but I do all that. And then the interior work, I'd pick out all the interior. I work with a couple of really talented ladies at some of the shops at Floor and Decor and Kimser, and tap into them, and they feel good about doing it too. So it's like, if everybody can feel good about what we're working on together, then we have a good product. You
working on things like insulation and types of water heaters and all of it.
Yeah, it's all. And I'm also real particular. If you go in one of my homes, and I'm not saying anybody's worse than me, but the homes that we're building are feel a little better. They've got better flow. I'm all about space. And again, maybe that was just the upbringing and all the engineering stuff we've done with office buildings and stadiums and Topgolfs. It's flow. You want you don't want odd spaces just for square footage. And you'll see, and maybe you won't, but a lot of builders today, they're building for square footage. So there might have a loft area that's 150, 200 square foot that serves no purpose, but it gives them square footage in their sale price. I don't want to do that.
So you've been in this for how long have you been doing this?
Well, I want to say I've been in real estate most of my life because of my father, but I started piddling in it back in 2009 when everything kind of went upside down. I started buying some of the foreclosure properties and fixing them up, putting them into rentals, and then it just kind of grew. And then when my wife and I had our divorce, I no longer worked for the family, so I kind of went full time in this. And then
how long ago was that?
For 3 years ago.
Okay,
4 years ago, give or take. But I started doing my own thing. But I had some investments, and I've got I've met some guys along the way that I believe in, like Rico Taylor. He runs Concrete Cowboy. I met him, and I've invested in him. Now we also, control Concrete Cowboy. It's a sports bar, but I wasn't as much into the sports bar as I was into this man. This guy can really operate a business, and it's been that way with a lot of my friends and a lot of business I'm in. I had a really good friend. We're not close anymore. That started a company. Was looking at starting a company called True Velocity, which is an ammunition company, and I felt like it would revolutionize and change the world. And they make a bullet that is made out of polymer, which is a real sophisticated plastic, and it's like a shotgun shell, but with a rifle cartridge. So 5.56, 7.62, 308, 50 millimeter, but they're 35 to 40% lighter because they're not brass than a brass bullet, and they don't conduct heat, so they don't heat the chamber of the gun, and they're not going to burn the soldier or the person next to them. And they use less gunpowder because the energy that would be absorbed through the heating of the expansion, now the energy is just to push that bullet down the barrel. And
no cool down for the gun.
The guns don't heat up like they do with brass. They do heat up over time, but that's normal with the fire. But I got involved in that, and I still think that business could be a unbelievable business. It's just the changing from someone going from a brass cartridge to a plastic cartridge. The mindset's been difficult, but this business we can make the bullets in this room, and so we can pick up the machines and send them anywhere in the world, and they can set up and they can be making bullets in anywhere in the world. So
when you're making a bullet like that, does it? Now I'm going to nerd out with you for a minute.
Let's go.
Does it, because of the mass is less? Does it travel less?
The bullet itself. The bullet itself is the exact same as the bullet that's in the brass.
Okay,
it's the same projectile.
Same projectile. It's the casing.
It's a casing.
Oh, it's the casing's different.
Yeah, the casing that kicks out when you shoot that machine gun, and all those little casings are kicking out. Well, ours are plastic. And they don't weigh anything, and they don't have any heat to them.
Right.
And the other benefit to them is we use a metal alloy as the primer area where the primer goes, so you can pick them up with a magnet. So go to the shooting range, you see them sweeping them up, having to pick the brass up. You run a magnet over, they all just jump to the magnet. There's so many cool things about that company, and I still think it's got some good upside. Yeah,
for sure. What was that called again?
True Velocity.
True Velocity.
Yeah, we make the bullets in Garland, and we've got a really nice facility there, and we've kind of transitioned now not to be a bullet manufacturing company, but to be a technology company, to where we can really license the ability to make bullets for other countries, our own country. And I think that transition is good. Yeah,
that's awesome. I love stories like that. I mean, we like to dig in and tell stories anyways as a marketing company. So it's like to nerd out when it comes to like, what's really the difference? I mean, that's really how you separate yourself, is why are we different than somebody else, and how can we sell ourselves as being better because of X, right? And so,
well, this one I always thought was going to be cool because of the drones kicking in, because you can fire bullets off drones, right? And ours, since they weigh 40% less, you're going to carry 40% more. And then the other thing that got me really excited, which I'm nerding back, I thought, wow, think about it. If you can only put so much weight on a C-130 cargo plane, so you're going to put, call it 100 pounds, and 100 pounds might be 1,000 bullets. Well, if I'm 35% lighter, that means that you're going to put 35% more bullets on. So then, I just thought, well, it makes a lot of sense. Save a little bit of money just in transportation right there.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and volume will be twice as much, or 35% more, but same weight. Cool. You can always stack up. You don't run out of weight on top of the boat. I mean, run out of space on top of the boat, do you? So pretty good. I guess it's under the cargo hold maybe, but
the war fighters that we dealt with, and again, I'm not involved. I was on the board for a while. I'm not on the board anymore, so I really don't know how but the war fighters that we talked to, they would rather carry more ammunition than they would water,
less wear and tear,
clothing. And it's like, I run out of ammunition, I'm dead. It's like, well, cool. So they really enjoyed the fact that, we were that much lighter, which, made you feel good about what you're working on.
Yeah, 100%. You give them 35% more ammo on that one. I think is even the best part of it too, because as a soldier's carrying that around and the weight behind that in general, most of the time they're not going to use it, so they're just taxing themselves with an extra 35% of carry every time. So by the time that they use it, then it does have the benefit of 35% more firepower.
Yeah, but if they know they're going to carry 25 pounds
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to say, well, listen, I'm going to lighten your load by 12.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they're going to go, well, no, I'll just carry more bullets. I'm going to carry that 25 pounds and I'll carry the extra ammo for it.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I'm saying. You got 35% more firepower, or you got 35% less weight. You know what I mean? So very cool. So that's the next step.
There's no step to that. You know, I invested in that a long time ago and we got that up and running. There's good people managing that company and, you know, just keep your fingers crossed that, you know, that the direction they're taking it is the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a next step? You have something in the oven you're trying to, another Papa John's pizza?
And I'm tinkering. My best friend, and it's a guy I'm going to introduce you to. He's one of the, he's my best friend. He's one of the greatest humans I know. He's come from a humble beginning. He's super intelligent. He's been punched in the face. He started several companies. He's made millions, lost millions, but he started a company that's called It's a Secret Med Spa. And he was before his time. And I give him credit. He's been ahead of the game in everything he's done. And I invested in him, but I'm also, money's in It's a Secret Med Spa.
Yeah.
And we've got 13 med spas in the Metroplex, and I've got them all over the country. We've got them putting one in Washington, D.C. We've got them, we shut one down in Chicago. We've got one in Arizona. We've got them in Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth. But that's another business that we're in, and it's doing really, really well. And it's, you know, I'm big into health and fitness. I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I like to work out. I like to stay fit. I like to eat right. And, you know, this kind of goes hand in hand because I think more and more people today, you know, want to feel better about themselves. They want to live longer, all this longevity stuff. And I think that his business, It's a Secret Med Spa, it's a brand. You know, most of these med spas are centered around a doctor or an injector. And his isn't. He's done a really good job of streamlining it and creating the efficiencies and the brand and selling what the consumer wants.
Yes,
and,
sir.
I'm really proud of him. I'm proud to be a part of his business.
Yeah. What I do love about everything that I've heard today out of you is, one, keeping focus on what it is that you're working for. And two is surrounding yourself with the people that reflect what you want to be. You know, it's all about the person for you, which I really respect that, honestly. Like that's, you know, it can be easy to take a deal, you know, with someone because you think there's so much growth or so much benefit on the other side of it. But at the end of the day, like if you're not working with the people that you trust or you know got your back or you just believe in, you know, it's a little harder to.
Yeah, you know, I've got a little bit of a motto, which is I might be crossing myself here, but you know, I want to back my money. So if I'm going to invest in something, I want to be a part of it. And it doesn't mean that I have to show up and work, but I need to know that the person that I'm investing with and in is going to show up and work, and because that's my money. And I've been that way with Rico. I've been that way with Justin. I've been that way, you know, with the people that I've worked with, you know, at Alltel, with the Cowboys organization. And, you know, I feel real blessed. I mean, because they take pride in what they're doing. And again, at the end of the day, your company's only is going to be as good as your employee. Right. And if they're not performing, then your company's not going to perform at the level you want it to. And I mean, I really believe that when it comes to my friends. You know, I've got some really good friends, and I know I said it earlier. The fact that my friends hang out with my kids is so cool. It's so cool.
That's pretty amazing. I'm going to scatter shoot with you for a little bit. You talked earlier about 6 people at a table. Who's coming to dinner with you?
You know, that's everybody says that stuff. You know, I've Will McClay would be one of them. He's he's an inspiration to me. He's a great father. He's been a a good friend. And, although we hadn't spent as much time as I'd like to spend together, I feel like every time I see him, we're right where we were. I'd love to have my father at the table. Again, like I said, I didn't spend that much time growing up with my dad, and I lived with him for 4 years out of school, and it went before I got engaged and got married. But it was really, looking back on it, it defined me because I recognized who he was, what he was about, that he really was a real human being and made human being mistakes, and that it's okay to make mistakes if you own them, and it's all those things. But he'd be one. And then you kind of just trickle down. I had a guy named Father Tribe who was the rector at the Catholic high school. Lou Holtz is still alive, so it'd be fun to have him around just because he's. I'll tell you what was so impactful about Lou. Here it is. I'm a freshman football player at the University of Arkansas, and he calls me into his office early in the season. We were playing Texas that next week. Texas was number 1 in the country. Arkansas wasn't even ranked. And he pulled me in and shut his door, and he said, wanted me to stand. So I was standing at the desk, and he got up on the board, and he said, "We're going to beat Texas next week, and you're going to be a big part of it." And I'm like, "Me?" And I'm thinking, how am I going to be a part of this? I was scared. I was nervous. I mean, I don't even know if I remember everything he said, but he was showing me how he was going to set up this play. We had a fullback named Jesse Clark. We had a running back named Gary Anderson. We had a couple other receivers, Keith Kidd, and some other players. I mean, nobody knows their names, but he says, they're not expecting you. All right. I'm going to put you in the game early, and we're going to run several plays that are similar. You're going to do the same formation. And so what he was doing was I came down and I was a big physical, player. I came down, I was doing a crackback on Texas's linebacker. So I come down and in the game, I come down and do the crackback on him. And I mean, I think I knocked myself out more than I knocked him out. And then I was running off the field, and he sent me right back on. And then we ran the same play again, design. I go in motion. And then we hand back off to Jesse Clark on the other side this time, because I came in motion from that side. So then I'm out of play, and I come back in a play. Now we're running the same play again. Now the linebacker and I butted heads twice hard. So as I come in motion, just exactly as Coach Holtz had planned it, they start yelling, "Crack, crack," which means I'm going to crack. So now the linebacker's looking at me, and he's not watching the running back. And I come down to crack on him. Gary slips down the sidelines, and we throw a 60-yard touchdown. And we went on and beat him 42-11. And I say that because that's just one story of how Lou Holtz, during my 2 years of playing, because he ended up moving to Minnesota, playing with him, how he used his players to get the best out of them.
He knew what your tool was.
Yeah, I don't know how I got there, but that was one of my good memories.
Yep. So Lou, your dad, who else did you say was at the table? Will McClay.
Yeah.
One more?
Man, you're starting digging. You get people looking for, only because he means so much to what I think carved my success, and he's still alive, is Joe Ford. He didn't even know how impactful he was to me. I just loved how he carried himself. I loved how he talked to people. I loved how he remembered people's names. I loved how he appreciated the secretary to the valet. I mean, I just watched him, and I'm like, I was blessed. He was vice chairman of Augusta National, and he invited me to go with him one weekend. And I didn't know what to expect. And it had actually snowed that night. And so, we get there, and I'm like, we're not going to play golf. There's snow on the ground, but it warmed up. We were the only people on the course. But just watching how he interacted and how he respected everybody, from the groundskeeper to the waiter to the general manager to the other executives that were there in the room. I just remember, I want to be like him, So I kind of hope I'm a little bit of a role model for my kids. I know their mom is, and I hope that they find other role models. I hope some of my friends that I think highly of, that my kids can look at them and emulate. Look, why is he successful? What makes him successful? Why does he have the drive that he has? And because my kids have the opportunity, and I see them already starting to climb that little opportunity ladder in their own way. Just like we said, I don't know what my kids will end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
I just believe they're going to end up doing something really cool,
and
that'll be on them.
Yeah, that's awesome. That reminds me. I've always been told, every relationship is like a bank. You got to put in as much as you withdraw. Some of these relationships that people always take from you. It's never really a two-way street where you can kind of reciprocate growth, right? But if you make sure that you're, like you said, giving or understanding or learning, or these people that you put around at your table do the same thing for you, or would do the same thing for you because they've molded you, right? That's the ultimate definition of a relationship.
It is. It's funny you were talking about, again, growing up in Arkansas, all my friends are there. So I moved to Dallas. I didn't have any friends. You make all new friends. Spent my whole life there, and I just went back from my brother's wedding and got to be around some of the guys I grew up with, and it's like we hadn't missed a beat. And if you remember earlier, I told you, so you made the analogy of putting money in the bank, and it goes back to my kids. If I said what was our theme at the end of games, they would say, "Tell me what you think. Put money in the bank."
Yeah.
And but it's true about a lot of things. You put a lot into a friendship, you should get a lot back.
Mm-hmm.
And I put a lot into my friendships growing up, and they're still there, which is cool.
Yeah, 100%. Do you drink alcohol at all?
I do, but not much.
Okay.
I'll have a glass of wine. I didn't drink at all. Well, I'll say that. We didn't really have alcohol in the house growing up with the kids. And then, now it's just, I don't drink a lot, but I'll have a glass of wine here and there.
Mm-hmm. Wine, beer, you just answered it, but wine, beer, whiskey.
I don't do beer. I don't drink whiskey. I'll do tequila. But tequila's kind of been my sneaky one because I'll get like a reposado, and I'll get a big rock in a Topo Chico, and while everybody else is drinking, I'll drink one drink the whole night because I'll just keep filling my drink up with Topo Chico, and
That's
nobody
smart.
pays attention. And so no, I'm not a real big drinker, and I like to be in control.
Yeah,
which might be bad, but I never want to be where I'm not in control.
Does that bring memories back to when you were younger? Is that the reason for that?
No, I like being in control. I've seen my dad sloppy, and that was hard. But he was a functioning alcoholic. No, and I think too is, I also want to be, I want to be smart, and being smart is not getting a DWI, not getting into a fight, not saying something, because you were drunk. I mean, that's no excuse.
Yeah, 100%.
And my kids are that way. I mean, kids have fun, but I think they've learned when to have fun and when not to have fun too.
Yeah, what kind of music you got in the car?
Music?
Yeah.
You're going to laugh. I don't listen to music.
Really?
Yeah.
First one to date. You're like the 50th episode, first one.
I kind of, my mind's always going. So,
okay.
I'm a little bit ADD. I'm always thinking, I'm always figuring things out. I'm always looking at, well, what about that? How can I do that better? You were bringing housing and talking about finishes. And while you're talking about it, I'm sitting here thinking about that fireplace mantle and did I have it the right height? I mean,
yeah.
I'm always thinking that way. I love country music. One of my good friends is a rock star, and I like his music.
Who's that?
John Bon Jovi.
Okay.
And not name drop, but he's. I met him during the Arena Football League. He had the Philadelphia team that he was the owner of, and then of course our family owned the Desperados, and he and I got to be weird as we got to be really close friends. It's like he's a super smart guy. He's an amazing marketing mind. He's really smart, and he's a great businessman. And we just got to be really good friends. And he's also a rock star, so it's weird.
Yeah,
but he called it wearing his monkey suit, bunny suit. I said bunny suit. And I'll tell that quick story. And ESPN, and we were up there meeting with the Arena League and ESPN to broadcast our games. And he had to go do a meet and greet for all the ESPN employees in their lunchroom. And he said, man, hang back with me. And I'm like, I'm going to go back to, he goes, no, I'll take you back, ride back with me. I got to put my bunny suit on. I'll be right back. And he walked off, and I'm like, bunny suit? And he comes back, and as he's walking up to me, he grabbed his tie, like top of his tie, and then unzipped himself although he didn't do it, he just did it and then kind of act like he's climbing out of it. And he goes, all right, let's go. And I said, what the hell was that about? And he said, man, he goes, I don't like being a rock star, but I know that's what people expect of me. So I had to dress up in my mind.
In the part.
In my mind.
Oh,
That's
okay.
he had to put his bunny suit on, his rock star outfit.
Huh.
And but he's a good man.
It was a mental transition he had to make real quick.
Yeah. And, you know, I've been with him before concerts and, you know, you're sitting there talking about life and kids, and he's got an amazing family. He's in business with his oldest son.
Mm.
They have that Hamptons wine, but you know, he sits there and talk to you, and then he'd have to put on his mindset of going to be a rock star and get up there and perform. And he's amazing talent.
Crazy? You know, it's funny. I go to I'm an artist as well, so I like, not a musician, but paint. So I go to gallery shows and stuff like that. Talking to people, talking to them about my artwork, whatever, the dog and pony show, of being around people is a different and completely different environment. You know, for me, it's not something I necessarily look forward to. It's draining.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there is a certain level of shallowness with a lot of that conversation. And I really sometimes really like to divulge into like deep conversations with people. Like if they really want to get into something, talk about process or whatever, I can really kind of nerd out when it goes to that scenario.
Right.
But then everything else becomes, you know, surface level.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go for hours of surface level, it's draining for me. You know what I mean? When you said put on the bunny suit like that, I don't know why I reflected to that moment of sometimes I feel like I step into something that's not me for a couple of hours, you know, and then every, you know, 10th person or something, you'll have a real true conversation with somebody, you know, but that really made me reflect on my own part of my life right there. Because there's a lot of reality to that, quite honestly. Because you really just want to be yourself sometimes and hang out with your kids or sit on the back porch with your wife and watch a sunset or, you know, do something simple.
My favorite thing right now in life is working out with my kids. You know, my youngest son, I work out every day together. Most days when he can get off work, I wait on him to come down and then we'll go hit the gym and hang out and work out. And that's, again, you're going to get that experience and that joy. And, you know, I just as a dad advising you, and I told this to one of my buddies the other day. I said, you know, stop treating your son the way you're treating him right now. And he was like, well, what do you mean? I said, when he was a baby, did you get down on all fours and go, gaga goo goo, gaga goo goo? And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, all right, he's 17 now. Get on his level. Look at him like a 17-year-old. Talk to him like a 17-year-old.
Nice. Yeah.
Not like you're his dad.
Yeah.
If you want to have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have no relationship with him when he was an infant and you're screaming at him or talking in a deep voice. You're just scaring the kid.
Yeah.
Get down there and be with him.
Yeah.
And he was like, wow. It's changed. It's changed him.
I remember when my kids turned 13, 14, we went from spending like all the time in a living room together watching shows and TVs, and all of a sudden like they started drifting towards their rooms. And I was like, oh, this is brutal. Like, I hate this. You know, quite honestly, like I really want to spend more time with them. So how do I do that? And I started talking to my wife about it. And I was like, you know, they go get on these games, they get on these headsets and they just disappear, you know, for hours. So I told her, I said, I'm going to buy one tomorrow. And she goes, okay. So I went and bought an Xbox. I went and bought a headset, downloaded their games. I got on and started playing their games so I could get on the mic with them and talk. And I was like, I wasn't good. I got better as I was doing it, but it was like I wanted to, wherever they were at whatever level they were doing, I just wanted to jump into that, you know? And so you're exactly right. Like what, you know, when you're talking to them as a baby, that's what they do. When you're talking to them as a 17-year-old, what do they do, right? You know, it's about that connection. I also play this game called Pass the Phone, right? And so we'll all be sitting in a circle listening to music, and I get 2 songs. You get 2 songs, you get 2 songs, you get 2 songs. We pass this in a circle. That way you can hear what I love. You can hear what moves me. You can hear the things that I have passion about. I can hear yours.
Right.
I can appreciate those. I can do that without all going, yeah, you know, this new music is terrible nowadays or whatever. Your music's terrible. Well, that just tears them away because that's what they're experiencing at the moment, right? That's what they feel. And so I want to connect with what they feel and why they feel that. And I also want them to connect with what I feel and why I feel it. the best part about that is now my children are now passing songs to their friends.
Yeah.
You know, they have these Spotify, you know, channels on there that they're, hey, listen to this one. It's like all my songs that I told them about, you know, and it's really cool. You know, it's like, but you have to connect. You have to just break outside of your shell. Like, yeah, you may be you and you may think that you're doing the right thing for everybody, but man, open up. Like, here's somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's their life like? You know, connect. Just, you know, it doesn't have to be the way you've seen it and the way you've processed it and the way you've done all these things. And then I expect you to rinse and repeat what I've done. It's like, you're going to live your own life and you're going to do your own thing. I should be able to insert where I can, but also just be present, you know?
Be human.
Be human. Yeah.
And I hope my kids, my friends, everybody, I made mistakes. I'll make mistakes going forward. I mean, I always tell in guidance, there's not just one way to do something.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of ways to do something. So it doesn't have to be your way.
Mm.
So figure out a way where you allow it to be y'all's way or their way. You're going to get the better result if they feel like they're doing it their way to get the result you want anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just like when I leave here, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways I can drive home.
Yeah.
Might not be the way you drive, but I'm going to get home.
Yeah. Well, I think last thing before I close out right here, you got a picture on the bottom down there. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, really, you asked me to bring a couple things. And I think one of the things you said was, what's really important to me in my life. And it's my 3 kids. And I made all decisions, some very difficult decisions, not decisions in my best interest to me personally, but I made decisions for my kids.
Mm.
And they were decisions for the better. And then, as I look at the youth sport picture that I have down there, that's me teaching my son and is an example how to get off the ball, how to get off fast so you can beat the opponent. And it started at an early age as, teachings, and then as I look at him, most proud I am, probably the most proud moment that I've had with Paxton was when he, his senior night, when he ran out on the football field down there at the University of Texas and came out in his little 86 and he came over and he hugged his mother and then he turned over and hugged me and told me he loved me. And it was special.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Hell of an accomplishment. It's one that I didn't do. So it even made it that much better to see him do something that I regretted that I didn't do. But that regret, I can't dwell on because it allowed me to coach and teach my son on how to accomplish something beyond his dream.
Yeah, the butterfly effect. Yep. Your choice caused another choice.
That's right.
Pretty amazing. Well, Shai, I tell you what, man, this has been a really great conversation for me. I've had such a good time talking to you. You're a super humble guy who seems like has all the right things in place. And I know no one's perfect, and I'm not putting it in that light. But what I am saying is, like, I appreciate your spirit, and I appreciate who you are as a person. And thank you so much for coming on the show with us. I really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone, Shai, that's the blueprint.